What's going on, everybody? It's me, Ryan Monson, the host of the Classic Buffalo podcast, the podcast that interviews everyday people on their mental health stories, everything from soup to nuts, A to Z, whatever somebody's been through, whatever they like to talk about, we talk about it on here, and how mental health has kind of swam and shimmied around in their life. And oh, there's a moment of mental health. Oh, there's a moment of mental health. Boom, boom, boom. That's what we do here. It gets pretty serious, gets pretty shallow. We're swimming a lot. I'm using a lot of metaphors early on if you're not used to it. But yeah, welcome. Today is another episode where we interview a longtime friend of mine, Luke Wehner. He and we met at Grace Church back when I was in my super Christian days, and he cares a lot about me. He was somewhat of a mentor for me as well. And so he and I have a prior relationship, and you'll see that we're a little bit goofy and some really funny moments that happen. But, it was really neat for me to kind of interview him on kind of a challenging and interesting time period of his life that I was capturing, where he was having to deal with a dream of his dying of sorts and how to grieve that process. And I think that was really beautiful to capture. On top of that, due to a variety of circumstances while we were recording, we could only record a certain amount of the podcast, and then we got way too busy, and then COVID hit. So we were able to reschedule months later. I think, I don't know, what was it, 4 months, something like that, where we were able to record the second half of this podcast. So if you notice, there's like kind of a really clear version of it. That's the first part of the interview, basically, where we were in person. And then, the Skype Zoom audio is kind of during COVID of Will. But I think it was kind of a cool thing because some things have changed. Yeah, I think it was kind of a little bit of a cool checkup. So, without further ado, let's get into today's episode with Luke Wehner, Book 68. Here we go. Joining me today is Luke Wehner. What's up, Luke?
Not much. Thanks for having me.
Oh shoot, my ice wanted to be a guest real quick. Introduce yourself. Tell people about you real quick.
All right, cool. So I'm Luke Wehner. I'm originally from Indianapolis. Grew up on the north side of Indy. Couple things you should know about me. I am one of 6, so I have 5 siblings. An older sister who's the oldest, and then 3 older brothers, and then a younger brother. So I actually have 4 brothers and a sister, and we are very spread out in age and location. We're all over the country. My sister lives in Houston. My other brother lives in Birmingham.
Dang.
Yeah, and then actually, as of last year, my other brother moved back and lives here in Fishers. So, but other than that, I am currently in a season where I'm kind of transitioning into something new. So I've got a lot of changes recently, which I know, Ryan, you've reached out to me, and so we'll obviously get into that. But tons of things I'd love to share, but I'm happy to be here and excited to, share some more.
So to get to know you a little bit better, we're going to do our first 5 questions, get you a little warmed up, hopping on the court of life and just taking some jump shots. Number 1, you get to go to dinner with anyone in the world who's alive.
Barack Obama.
Okay.
Because I think there would be so many things that I could ask him about that are like literally could touch on every subject in the world, and he would have either opinion about or experience about or like some perspective on. This isn't even like a political thing. I just have tremendous respect for him. I think he just would have a lot of interesting things to say. So I'll say Barack Obama.
Where would you go to eat?
I'd go to his favorite place in D.C. How about that?
Oh, yeah. So you go, hey, that's really cool. Like, mom and pop stuff that he knows about. Yeah, that'd be kind of cool.
Exactly. I'd say, hey, Obama, where's your favorite place in D.C.? And then that's where we'd go. Yeah.
If you had the choice between knowing the history of every object that you touched or being able to talk with animals, which one would you choose?
Talk with animals, probably. I don't understand the first one.
Yeah, so you get to like see who's owned it before. You get to see like where it was maybe like made, where it was born.
I feel like most of that's probably already like able to be found out for the most part. So I think I would say talk to animals, partially because I think I love animals and we have a dog and I'd love to talk to my dog. I think that'd be so fun. and just in general, right? I think we'd be in nature more. Like we would be walking in nature, talking to birds, talking to squirrels, like it would be really interesting.
Number 3, would you rather, if you had a choice between going forward in time and choosing to go back in time, what would you do? And you can go back to the present, but would you want to see the future or the past?
That's a hard one. Probably go back in time, partially because I think I don't know if I want to live in a life that I know what's about to happen. I think it changes the way you live. And for positive and negative, I can totally see the argument either way. But I would want to relive good memories of the past. And I think because they've already happened, I would feel more like I could be in that moment probably better. But in the future, it's all new and you're just like, should I be seeing this? That kind of thing.
Yeah,
but,
yeah. I would really want to see my ancestors like back. Like, just like, oh, that's my great, whatever, and just see like who they were and what they were like, and like, oh, I hit it off with my great grandpa or whatever. That'd be kind of dope.
Yeah.
What's the first thing you do with $1 million?
Honestly, I'd probably get a new house. Like we would sell our house that we're in now, and that's been something we've wanted to do. So it would give us a different market for a house that we've been wanting. We'd probably still buy a fixer upper, but it would be maybe bigger, have more land, that kind of thing.
Embarrassing moment.
I have like snapshot moments of like embarrassing things.
Yeah.
Like when I was in high school, like we were at this high school football game. I was in middle school and we were at a high school football game and somebody just like came up and pulled my pants down. Like, like just stupid stuff like that. And you just feel embarrassed and like, but of course that's like you're a little kid and not that it like makes it any better, but like the other one that I always remember, and this is really strange, but I had a professor in college that I didn't know. She had like kind of a unique first name and I assumed she was a guy. So I kept emailing her, Mr. So-and-so, like, and finally after like 5 emails, like I think she said something to me and I was like so embarrassed because I was like, oh my gosh, she's going to fail me. Like I'm convinced like it's over.
Oh, no. So you passed the first 5.
All right, we made it.
Do you remember how we met?
I don't have like a specific memory, but I remember Access being kind of the linchpin. So Access was the young adult ministry at Grace Church. Ryan and I both were a part of that, and we became friends kind of through that.
Right. I don't remember it either. I just remember that there's a similar person that was like this, but you were like the cool guy where it was like man crush sort of, where I was like, oh, I want to be that dude's friend. Seriously.
Like love at first sight or more like...
For sure.
Well, you said man crush.
Rob,
so.
Good point. Access was such a huge part of both of our lives, like in our late college, like post-college years, where it was like worship, it was community stuff, and like I think you were just in general one of the popular guys, but like it's been a weird like friendship because we're close in age, but I view you in like a mentor role, as almost as if you were like 5-10 years old. It's so weird. I don't know how to explain it, but you've always like emanated maturity and like welcomed other people. And I think like, have you always been popular?
Well, I don't know about the popularity piece. I have always, I think, felt older. So I think that might be some of it of like, I think I do project a little bit of that, but not intentionally. I think part of it was, I think, just the way I grew up. So my mom actually started me a year later in kindergarten. So I was actually older for my grade.
Oh, yeah.
So actually, even way back from being a kid, like that has always been kind of a piece of who I was I was a little bit older for my grade. And so I did always kind of feel like I don't know if it was like taking on a parent role, but I always had a little bit more of that feeling of like, okay, I'm older. I have some of that like understanding. But I similarly, even as you share that, like I have people in my life that, they're only like 2 years older than me. And I'm like, man, like you have so much wisdom. And I just want to like soak all that up. So.
Right. So you grew up in like kind of the same county as me, which our county's known for being sort of hoity-toity, sort of kind of a little well off, or maybe not as cultured, if you will. How do you respond to sort of the stereotype of, oh, well, you're just a rich kid, or you haven't gone through anything, like kind of elaborate any more on some background, or was that true? Like, did you have the ideal growing up, life and stuff like that?
Our county obviously has a lot of stereotypes that run with it. And honestly, Ryan, I think there's some truth to a lot of what people talk about in the sense that it is very sheltered. I think there are a lot of things that you experience in a more affluent, upper middle class, upper class world that honestly you don't experience. So I live in Broad Ripple now. I live, pretty close to, a lot of neighborhoods and pockets of the city that honestly it is a completely different upbringing. My wife actually grew up a mile from where we live now. So her and I have conversations about this all the time. And yeah, there were things I was sheltered from.
Yeah.
But what I can tell you is that doesn't mean that you can't experience it in your own way. It doesn't mean that you can't be intentional in finding ways to interact with people, finding ways to build relationships with people who don't look like you, who don't act like you, who don't have the same perspective as you. So yeah, I mean, it matters where you live, and that community will shape you and form you. But I think what that means for me is you just have to be extra intentional to put yourself in spaces where you're going to meet people who are different than you. And
what was like your first experience oh, there's more than this bubble?
Yeah. So for me, it was my parents used to take us down to Wheeler Mission, which is an inner city mission that serves homeless men primarily food. So we would go down every Sunday. And so that was for me as a young age. My parents would take me down there. And I remember feeling, that feeling of, wow, this is really different. Like, this is not Carmel. This is not Fishers. This is not Westfield. Like, this is not the suburbs.
Right.
And in many ways, though, as you become more connected with a community that's different than yours, that initial kind of like, they're so different, this weird, fearful, it started to change. And I think what I started to realize is like, wow, there's actually a lot of similarities between who I am and who you are. And that doesn't mean that similarities in our background or what we were raised in, but similarities in that we both love the Colts, or we both love talking about sports, or we both, connect on levels about food or whatever it is. There was these kind of common pieces that we could connect on that I realized, oh, you're not that much different than who I am, and I don't need to be afraid of someone who's different than me. I don't need to be afraid of a different, experience like that.
Yeah. We kind of already mentioned it with having the faith piece be somewhat of our connecting, fiber here. But for a while, you were trying to do residency, possibly do a church plant, but you were basically working with the church in a nonprofit role, having to do fundraising. Talk about like your faith journey a little bit, like growing up, and if there were some defining moments, like feel free to be specific, or, kind of something like in high school that was like, whatever.
Probably typical upbringing in that, I had two parents who raised us to be Christians. I grew up going to church. Church had a huge impact on my life, very formative. Had tons of mentors, especially middle school, high school, who really kind of took me under their wing and really taught me so much about life. And really, what does it look like to be someone who follows Jesus or proclaims to follow Jesus? But a lot of that too, and you hear this said a lot, especially in Christian circles, but a lot of that really is handed to you. It's a lot of things that I think you are told to believe, and I think you're at an age where you're not really quite ready to start asking questions, and so it really is easy. It's simple. And not easy in the sense of every day is a cakewalk. I'm not saying that at all. I think what I mean by easy is you're not really asking harder questions yet. And so life is a bit more simple. And so it wasn't really until college that I had a couple really significant experiences. One of them was going on the trip to Toronto, which you're familiar with.
Love it.
Toronto is a very unique trip, which really allows you to kind of open up your ideas and thoughts about life and all these different topics and issues that are happening in the world, anything from racism to social injustice to sex trafficking to, income inequity, homelessness, all these things that happen in our world, you're seeing in Toronto, which you see in the U.S., but in Toronto, because it's such a diverse, unique city, it's all around you, and so you can't escape it. And so that experience, kind of paired with my college experience of really being open to ask these questions is really when things started to shift for me. And, I think a lot of people, they get to that point, and I think a lot of people our age, if I'm honest, Ryan, get to that point where they're kind of done, right? They're ready to kind of walk away, and God doesn't really have as much meaning or purpose to them anymore. And I think Jesus becomes this big question mark of, why do I need him? Something that I can't see, I can't experience right now, I can't tangibly see in my everyday life or experience. And I think it becomes this big question mark of, why do I keep believing this thing that was handed to me? And I ask those same questions. And if I'm honest, I still ask those questions even today.
Right.
But I'd say as I've journeyed, it's been this ebb and flow of figuring out what is really at the heart of the Christian message, what is really at the heart of all these things that were handed to me. Yes, I have to stop and actually ask the question of, do these still matter to me? Are they still important to me? And actually wrestle with those things. And at the same time, why is it that I'm still compelled by this message? What was it that Jesus said, that he taught, that he came here for, that is still so significant and so meaningful even today? And whether you believe that message or you don't, there's something so fundamental about what he taught that radically changed the way we think about life and radically changed the way we think about our world. And so obviously there are people out there who believe he really was the Son of God. There are some who just believe he was a prophet,
Right.
like in Islam, like Muhammad's. I mean, it's across the board about who Jesus really was. But at the end of the day, what you can't deny is he changed the world. And because of that, I think you have to respond in a way of, okay, who is this man? Who is this?
Answer the question.
Yeah, in some way. It doesn't need to be this like hard and fast, black and white. But for me, with where I'm at, I still ask really, really tough questions about Christianity. I still ask, why does this happen? Why do we not fully understand this? And why is there so much division in the world when all Jesus wanted and desired was for us to be united? And in the middle of all that, why is it that I'm still so compelled by what he said and what he taught and who he was? And that's honestly what's kind of keeping me where I'm at.
Yeah.
And that's what's kept me kind of continuing to discover and learn more about what that means.
Mm-hmm. Let's take us to senior year, because you also went to a Christian college too, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So you're senior, and did you go right into the Grace internship?
I did, yep. So I went to Hope College in Holland, Michigan, another huge pocket of a Christian world. I left my senior year and I came back and actually did an internship at Grace Church, primarily focused on young adults. So I was spending majority of my year really focused on helping young adults to cultivate and grow their faith and ask harder questions of their spirituality.
And so how long were you doing that? Like this, because like 2 or 3 years?
So I did that role with young adults for a year, and then actually got married, and then my wife and I moved down to Bloomington for a year, and we were part of a church plant in Bloomington, Indiana.
How has it been having a partner support you in this journey? Like, I guess where they have their own passions and stuff. I guess I'm asking about in general what marriage is like. But with you and your passion, how has that kind of played out?
It's hard. I've been in the nonprofit world for several years now, and I've lived and existed in that and been in vocational, particularly being in that role. And as hard as it is for the person in the role, I would argue it's harder for a spouse. And that's, again, not me having experienced it. It's me watching my wife journey through these years of what toll it takes on your family just from time commitment and struggle and financially what it does, because it is a sacrifice and it's something that you're committing your life to that can be very challenging. At the same time, it can also be very, very connecting. It can be very powerful in the way that we're able to unite in a passion and a feeling behind what it is that we're doing to help change and help people. So it can still be a really positive thing at the same time. And most things in life, are two sides of the same coin. There's a huge challenge on one side and there's a huge positive perspective on the other. For her and her passion being, primarily she's very creative. She owns her own photography business, and it's been a very good match because of the way that our schedules have functioned and the way that we've been able to balance that. And so in that way, it's been positive. But I know for me, it's been a constant kind of tension of wondering, I want her to feel like she can fully pursue what it is that she wants to do. And I don't want what I'm doing to be the thing that stops her from doing that. And vice versa. She says that to me all the time. And so it is a constant conversation about making sure we are both being aware of what it is that each of us want to do in life, and making sure that we're each our number one fan and supporter, and making sure that happens. So, dude, your apartment's cold.
Oh, dude.
Do you not have a heat on or anything?
Maybe not. I don't know.
I am like freezing.
Here, I got a blanket. Oh, it's 63 degrees.
I'm like shivering.
I thought you were nervous.
No, it's not nervous. I'm like just cold. And you had like a short sleeve on, so I was like, oh man, he must be like just hot. Just trying to save that cash flow.
Yeah.
If only they could see me all bundled up like this.
Yeah. What it's really like to record an episode. What's like one of your favorite memories growing up?
Going up to, my grandparents had a lake house on Lake Michigan in Holland, which is where Hope is. So it's a big reason why I went to Hope. But we would go up there in the summer. And when I was really little, we'd spend like 2 weeks up there. But just really, really fond memories of being at the lake. Beautiful summers in Michigan. And it was one of the rare times that I didn't know as a kid, but it was one of the rare times that we were actually all together, which now, today, with everybody in their own season of life, and, you know, I got siblings with kids, and it's just, that's so rare. And so I look back on it, and I remember as a kid cherishing those moments, and now I look back on it, and I'm like, man, I mean, I knew something as a kid, but now I don't even know if I knew how special that time was. Because it's just time you can't get back. And it is like, we're still all here. Like, we're all obviously still alive. We're still, you know, but it's time that you don't get that season back of being young and being in a family where you don't know anything else different. So it's a really special memory for me.
Do you ever remember like adults saying like, I wish I was younger, or like, enjoy it while you can? You're like, shut up. Like, but like now that's all I wish I could do is tell people like, enjoy being like in middle school or high school, or enjoy being like just running around in hide go seek.
Yeah.
But I also remember being like, shut up, old guy, you know?
Yeah. I remember my older brother one day, I came home and he had said something similar because I was complaining about homework or something. I was like in third grade. He's like, don't ever wish away this season of life. And I remember like he kind of said it like teasingly as like an older brother.
Right.
But like there was some like deep meaning behind that of like, no, like you don't even know how special this time is. And so yeah, it absolutely. I'm like, I look back on that and I was like, yeah, you don't know what you don't know as a little kid. But yeah, it's so true.
So in this season of life, I guess, or in general, like what do you do to kind of be mindful to enjoy the confusion, the good times, the hard times? Like how do you practice mindfulness, I guess?
Journaling has been a powerful practice for me of being able to actually sit either in the beginning of a day or at the end of a day and actually reflect and be able to actually name some of those things that are really good. You obviously journal about the things that are hard and challenging, but also like remembering like what were you grateful for today, and like what is it that you want to recognize and remember, whether it's about this day or this week or this month. And so yeah, even in seasons of confusion, seasons of hard questioning, I think there's moments where we can stop and pause. And sometimes it's not always just journaling. Sometimes it's even conversations with people. It actually kind of reminds me of what I'm actually grateful for. So even as I'm doing this with you, like there's a therapeutic practice of talking about what it is that's really going on that I think is very meaningful and helps me to actually bring to the surface what it is that's like something I'm grateful for, season of life that I can name the things that are good.
Yeah. Everybody likes to do something different. So some people like to draw, some people like to journal, some people need counseling, some people do all three. Do you think it's a universal thing, or like what are your thoughts on journaling?
You know, obviously I'm not a like prescribe one thing universally. That's not necessarily my adoption of things. I will say one practice that I'm getting pretty close to saying is pretty much, I think, beneficial for everyone, which is counseling and therapy. I tend to actually think, and obviously there's exceptions in that, but I think generally for the average person, I think counseling and therapy is very much a prescribed, like that will help.
Misconception about therapy.
You go into a room and all you do is just talk about things that you think don't matter, or you pay a bunch of money to someone who's not going to help you, or I don't need therapy, aka I'm strong enough to get through what I'm getting through and I don't need help. It's okay if actually that's not true and actually you aren't strong enough to get through this, and B, there are millions of people who have made the decision to say, no, I actually do need help. And so to say that point blank as a universal kind of thing, to me, it belittles what other people who are very brave and are very, very self-aware and being able to say, no, I need this. Somebody told me this, unhealthy people don't need counseling, healthy people get counseling. I had a therapist tell me that in college.
What does that mean?
we think unhealthy people have to go to therapy, when in reality it is one of the most healthiest choices you can make for your life. We have this perception that, oh, they must be really struggling. They must have a lot of unhealthy things, which, yeah, we all do. But the reality is the decision to actually say, I'm going to go see someone is a very, very healthy choice, which means you're a healthy person for deciding you need to go figure out what's going on, and have someone who's clinically trained and professional to help you. I think one of the biggest things I've struggled with, and that I think I see and experience when I talk with people, is there's this big lie that I think is told to us that says that we're just all alone. And we're experiencing what we're experiencing in a vacuum, and no one else knows or has had experience with what it is that I'm feeling or going through. And I think one of the biggest pieces of realization and advice that I've received is that that's exactly what will keep you in a place of suffering and keep you in a place of not reaching out, because you don't think anyone's going to get it. And probably even more so, you think people will judge you and think you're weird and strange and not normal. I can't tell you how many times I've sat in my therapist's office, and at the heart of the things I struggled with as a little kid were that I thought I was weird and not normal. And that's what actually created these wounds and these things inside me, was because I believed I was a weird kid, a not normal kid who was going through something that he shouldn't have been. And the reality is so many people had that experience or something similar, or something that at least caused that type of feeling. But as a little kid, you don't know that. You don't look around and see your other friends and think, yeah, I bet Tommy's having that same experience. You think, no, I'm the only one, and I'm alone and I'm isolated. And the reality is we end up probably just shoving that down and not dealing with it ever. So for me, the biggest piece I've realized is what I'm going through, I'm not alone in. And two, like, it's okay to talk about it. It's okay to actually be honest about how hard that was, or how scared you felt, or how alone you've been feeling about whatever it is. And so bringing those things to light, to me, have been a really powerful thing.
What have been like your experience with anxiety or depression? Or if you haven't had personal experience with it, what have been your friends or family kind of interacting with those who do? What has that been like?
All the above, for sure. Probably the biggest of those was anxiety. So I had anxiety as a kid, undiagnosed and unnamed, and I think I just got really good at coping with it, but I was a pretty anxious kid.
Yeah.
It really came to probably a head in college. My senior year, I didn't know what I was doing after graduation. I knew I had $90,000 of debt, and I was stepping into who knows what.
Yeah. And
I remember that season I had more migraines out of just anxiety than I'd ever had, and just crippling migraines as a physical. Mm-hmm. That's kind of the way my body deals with stress, is I just have these physical kind of manifestations. So anxiety, for sure, a real thing for me. And more often than not, undiagnosed and unnamed. I'm very, very bad at naming when I'm dealing with it or having those types of episodes. And then depression, really in kind of small quantities, but still significant in that my anxiety not being dealt with, and then eventually leading to depression. So feeling hopeless, feeling stuck, feeling like I don't have any ability to get myself out of my situation. I have friends and I have people that I'm very close to that have dealt with depression on a much deeper level, and obviously suicidal ideation being a real part of that. And so there's pieces of that I have not experienced personally, and so I don't want to speak to that personally, but I have walked and journeyed with people. And I know that's a very real thing. And the other thing I'll say about this too, especially with anxiety and depression, because it is such a topic that hasn't really been talked about enough, and I think it's starting to, and it's becoming more of a conversation, and I don't think we can talk about it too much, to be honest. But I think one of the pieces that I was very much critical of and in my younger years not understanding of, which is medication to treat anxiety and depression. I was very judgmental of people who needed medication, and I think that's another piece within this conversation that I think people need to be more educated in the realization of what chemical imbalance means within this, and how that can have an effect and will play a huge role in someone's chemical makeup, and how that affects the way they feel. And that's real. And those that claim that that's not real, I don't think fully understand the way the body works and the way that minds work. And so for me, I was very naive and very uneducated in that world. And so that's one piece I think I just say, just to emphasize that there is more going on in the story of anxiety, depression, and mental health. And we need to know the full story before we draw any conclusions about people.
A lot of times you see people just not even giving support just because they need to know the full story, or like, well, I don't want to support them or like shower them with compliments because they're probably just doing this for attention. But it's like, that should be like the last thing we think about, instead of just loving this person or sending them a DM on Instagram saying, hey, I hope things get better. That should be our focus versus like, I guess I'd rather have attention seeking people than a bunch of people that feel alone because they did reach out and nobody said, oh, I saw you post something and like, I'm worried about you. Whatever. I'd rather have that. But
both of those things you just named, what are they both? They're both ways in which people have, in the best way they can, try and get help.
Yep.
Right? And everybody does that in different ways. So like you may have a person who's more, they go and isolate themselves and they don't want to be, pursued, and they don't want people to, you're right. And that's a dangerous place to be. And in the same way, you have people that, they're posting everything on their social media, but in essence, what is the common thread there? There's still someone who's hurting. And so regardless of the expression they're taking, we as a society and as people who know that people are hurting all around us, we need to be awake to the reality that it doesn't matter how that's taking, what form that's taking, right? I mean, at the end of the day, we both know somebody's hurting here. Yeah. And we need to be awake to that.
So somewhat related to what you were saying about like the conversation starting to, generate and begin and stuff. And it made me think of how it's becoming trendy to either have it a business associated or a part of your bit, like we support this, or like, so apparently today is called Blue Monday that we're recording this, which means it's supposed to be the most depressing day of the entire year. Mm-hmm. But it turns out that that's actually false, that you're just as likely to be sad during any other day. Than like, there's no special thing about today, but Blue Monday was created by a flight company in order to say like, feeling blue, take a trip to Florida or whatever. Mm-hmm. And it's a completely like fabricated, like kind of scheme to kind of get more tourist destinations booked and stuff like that. I just was like, oh my gosh, I can't believe that's a thing. Instead of like National Suicide Prevention Day, it's like actually just a thing to promote, just to take a trip to Florida. But yeah. But we are getting better. Like more people are talking about it, Mm-hmm. When shit hits the fan, what do you do for other people, and what do other people do for you that really helps? And this is basically a veiled question about your love language, basically.
It's contextualized, obviously, to who it is that I'm helping.
So you have a conversation or try to, you don't have to be very forward about like, hi, so when things go, you don't really need, but like, no. It's about the relationship, and you kind of get to know them. You're like, oh, okay, I do know Jimmy likes this, or, Jane likes, whatever.
In many ways too, I think it's even probably deeper than that, in the sense that like, I think those are important things to be aware of. And I think it's really healthy to know this is what, so-and-so needs because of this. But honestly, like, I think I often, for me, because I think I'm really good at assuming, oh, this is what I think you need, but I think I'm really bad at asking. I think there's circumstances when being forward and saying like, no, I'm going to like go and buy your groceries for this week. And I think that's like a very active form of kindness. But I also think most times in life, we just need to ask, what is it? How can I help? I think just as easily we can fall prey into when helping hurts and actually like we think we're helping, but in reality we might be making it harder, or assuming we know exactly what they need. And obviously all that, again, like I said, is contextualized to the person. But I don't think it ever hurts to ask. We can always ask, how is it that I can be helping you? And being very genuine with that, to say like, and I don't just say that as like a cursory thing, but like really like, what is it that I can do? And then the second piece for me, I think when I'm in that season, is honestly, it's just people who are available. For me, I don't know where that falls in the love language, maybe quality time, but it's people who are there to just talk, who are genuinely interested in what's happening and want to ask questions and kind of get to know what's really going on. So
yeah, a lot of this has been like all of these thoughts and these questions have been the background of what's been going on for the last year or two. So kind of talk about, you exit kind of the Grace situation and you decided to go into an organization that was a little more targeted to college students and doing ministry. Can you talk a little bit about that and kind of what that was like, what your experience and eventually into your quote unquote somewhat burnout and kind of, I'd like to touch a little bit on that if we can.
Sure. Yeah. So I left my church role, had moved into kind of nonprofit parachurch, which was Young Life. And I was just kind of, as you said, I was focused on college age. So I was working at Butler University here in Indy. What we were really focused on, you could really boil it all down. I've talked to you, Ryan, about this, but it really all comes down to creating space for students. So we created space to help them process, explore, discover, experience something that's significant to them. And we believe that took root or form in following Jesus, but we were obviously open to what that meant for them. And for some, it was as simple as just coming to a community where they felt like they belonged. And for others, it was coming to a space that they felt like, this is where I can be honest and vulnerable and be my real self, because there's not a lot of spaces like that in the world where you can just be truly honestly who you are. As I'm sharing it, right? Like it sounds, wow, that's amazing. Like that's the community we all desire to be a part of. That's what we all want to be a part of. Yeah. And none of that, though, is not without its sacrifice. None of that is not without the hardship of what it takes to actually get there and to actually live a community like that. And so for me, I'm in a season where like I'm trying to create this community and be a part of this community. I guess you could say lead it in a way of what it looks like to help form and shape other leaders to be representations of what we want to be as an organization. And all the while, I think I was just in this season of starting to really question and wonder if I could keep going. And I'm really good at denying when I'm at my wit's end, and I'm really good at pushing through things without naming what I'm really feeling, which for a while was burnout. And for a while was this feeling of, I don't have a lot left in the tank, but I'm waking up every day and just pretending. Pretending can get you down the street a little further, but eventually you just run out. And I knew I could have kept pushing probably for a little bit longer, but I knew if I had done that, it would probably get to a much worse place. And it was a very hard decision to end up deciding that I needed to step away from that space, because there were a lot of people I cared about and loved and cared for from the bottom of my heart. And in the middle of all that, I think what I began to realize was, at what point do you start losing the ability to actually love and care for them the way that they need at the expense of your own life and health and actual ability to even do that? Yep. And it's a hard realization when you hit your limit, especially for me and my personality. For those of you that follow the Enneagram, I'm an Enneagram 8. And so there's this innate tendency I have that like my energy is limitless, which is not true. I do have a limit. And that's a really hard thing to admit, that you don't have enough right now. That core piece is what I had to eventually come to. Once I was able to accept that, it did get a little easier, but it was still this space of, man, that sucks. And then you start to question like, man, I spent all this time, all this energy, and was it worth it? And how much did I lose of my life in that? And not a regret of the people, not a regret of the organization, but a regret in the sense of like, did I not do it the right way? Did I do something wrong here? Did I make a mistake in the way that I went about this? And so, that eventually led to my stepping away. And then, I stepped kind of into a season of unknown and was really, and still am, kind of in a season of wondering and questioning what's next.
What have you done that's like helped navigate yourself in this time period of stepping away? Tips to other people who are burnt out.
Yeah, I can't believe I'm saying this, because if I had said this 5 years ago, 10 years ago, I'd be laughing at myself. But crying. To a point in my life where I think crying's underrated. I think especially in male culture, it's very suppressed. It's very shamed is the word I would use. Shame is very much attached to crying. Embarrassment and fear of what people think, all of those things. But crying is this release of a feeling that is so innate and natural to the human experience. I mean, you can't separate what it means to be human and to not have some semblance of understanding what it means to cry. And to me, I think the core of empathy really is rooted in this understanding of that crying as an expression. It's a surrender of I'm not going to hold this in anymore, but I'm going to let it go because for the sake of my own life and to express something so authentically. And obviously in the right spaces and in right appropriate moments with people you trust and if not with people, that's fine on your own, whatever it is. But I think like crying for me has been this therapy of accepting what is really true. Not trying to spin this into a positive, not trying to make my life sound like it's better, not trying to pretend that it's going to get better right away, but just accepting the truth of this really sucks and I just need to cry about it. Thank you, Jesus, that there are people in my life who sit with me when I cry. And not always, but the people that I love and trust, my wife being the first, holding me while I cry. I mean, just pieces of this that I think are very fundamental. So it's just funny that that's the first thing that like pops into my head of like, you ask me, how do you deal with it? And it's like, cry, feel it, fully experience what it is that you went through.
Yeah, because you're grieving a little bit.
That's a great word. That's exactly what it was and still is. It's a grieving of what I thought it was going to be. It was a grieving of losing a dream. It was grieving the loss of something that you care so deeply about.
Yeah. Do you think it's more of like a recharge and then I'm going to go after it again? Like what are your thoughts? Are you like, I'm just staying here until a new thing is growing somewhere in the background? Because I'm kind of afraid to pursue my dreams. Because if I fail, it's like, that's my reason for living. Part of why I do this. If I just all of a sudden don't have this thing and I don't have the energy to do it anymore, or I don't have like, what else do I have? That's why I just was so intrigued with you sharing your story, just because I know how raw this time of your life has been, and just for you to share that.
We do all have dreams, and whether we've named them or not, I think they're still inside of us on some level. And I think fear is often attached to dreams because I think dreams are very vulnerable. There's a piece of us attached to a dream. And just like I think we're afraid to be rejected in the world, our true selves being really shown for what they really are and then not accepted or not truly loved, I think that same thing is true and it gets extended into dreams because it's, okay, I have this dream and I want to put it out into the world, but I'm not sure what that's going to mean, right? And it could be what people think, but it also could just be, what if it doesn't work out?
Yeah.
What if I fail? What if I don't do what I thought I could do? What if all these expectations I have on this are not met? Now what do I do? The dream that I put out there now is killed or dying or dead or whatever, And then you sit there and you wonder, okay, then what's left? Something that's helping me change a perspective on that is I don't think we live for just one dream. I think dreams evolve and I think they're alive and they're organic. And I think just because one is starting to die or it did die or there's a fear that it's dying, I don't think that changes us having a desire to have dreams. And I think even when they do die, that's just creating fertile ground for a new one to grow. And I think the more we can come to accept that that's the truth, the more we can push forward into dreams with the less fear, because even if it doesn't work out, we know dreams are bigger than just that one. And I think there's a posture there that I'm still exploring and I don't have a full grasp of what that means, but it's helping me in this season of learning more about what does it really mean to have a dream and what does it look like to really pursue a dream.
So now we're recording this a couple months later. I wanted to ask you about, this is kind of the coronavirus, this stuff, and not only that, but you kind of got a job and started the current chapter that you're in. And I just wanted to ask you, how have you personally, your family, like how are you doing amongst all this, and what's it like at your new job?
Considering everything that's going on, I think the general feeling from most people, and this is true for me and our family, is it's just crazy. Like we just don't really know what's happening. Relatively speaking, I think I will start with saying like we're doing pretty well. Like I think like there are obviously a lot of people in the world that are not doing well, whether they're being affected by the actual virus, so they're in hospitals, or family members are, or they can't see or be around close family members. And I'd say relative to that, like our family is in a better position, you know, considering none of us have gotten it. We haven't been really influenced directly by it. Now, I think everybody's being affected by it in some capacity, like, you know, economically, whatever. So for us, like, we feel very fortunate, right? Like, that I got a job right before it hit, you know, and fortunately my job wasn't furloughed and it wasn't cut. So yeah, I feel very fortunate to be where we are, and I don't take that for granted. You know, being stuck in our houses, not being able to do the normal things. You know, Emily, my wife's a photographer, so a lot of her business has been cut or at least delayed, and so she's not getting her typical payments for weddings coming up. And so yeah, I mean, it affects us in a lot of different ways, and it's easy for me to just be like, yeah, we're great, like, and we are relatively, but I think also like it is worth mentioning that yeah, it's hard mentally to process everything, and more than anything, just not see people. You know, I miss being able to go to restaurants and be able to sit and actually have conversations with people and be able to connect in real life, which is a big deal for me. So
what's been your outlet?
I'm pretty bad at journaling, so that has been not as consistent, which is normally my outlet in, you know, a typical season. But no, it's house projects. It's doing stuff outside. It gives me life. And that is probably the biggest blessing in this, is that I've been able to continue to do those. And yeah, it's a huge outlet. I would be in a much worse spot if I didn't have the ability to actually like get outside, use my hands, be able to like do some yard work on our house, go for walks, go on bike rides. Like, yeah, the huge outlets, and something that's made a big difference for sure.
Yeah, what's one of the best things that's happened in the last 4 months?
Oh, I've been using more recent examples. So like yesterday was my birthday. And
Happy birthday.
Celebrating my birthday in a really unique way, right? Like,
yeah, what'd you do?
Not anything crazy, right? Like you can't go to a restaurant really. We're still in Marion County, so a lot of it's being restricted. We got takeout for lunch, we got takeout for dinner, and then I took the afternoon off, and Emily and I went to a park and hiked and took our dog. And it's really simple, but I think for me it was just the fact that it was like different, you know, like it was, I knew it was my birthday and it felt different. And even if I was doing kind of all the same similar things, it just was cool to like get messages from people and, you know, be thought of by a lot of people. It makes a big difference, and it makes you feel like very loved and cared for.
All right, so now I want to wrap up. I want to get into the final 5 questions. Number 1, what is a pet peeve of yours?
This is just a thing personally, but then sometimes it bothers me with guys with long fingernails, particularly mine the most. Like I cannot have long fingernails. I have to cut them. And then when I see it on other guys, it's like it's not like, oh, you need to go cut your fingernails. It's more just like, why? Like, and it's not even like a judgment of like, if that's what you prefer, fine. Like you want to paint your nails or whatever. It's more like that feels uncomfortable for me. So it's not even like I'm trying to tell you what you should be doing. It's more like I'm feeling what that feels like to me, and it just bothers me.
Yeah.
So, but for some reason with girls, like it's totally normal. I'm just like, whatever, like that's, you know. Another one would be, so when you're walking in a crowd, which, hey, I haven't done that in a while, but walking like at an amusement park or like a busy mall, and there's like people in front of you that you're walking behind, and they literally in the middle of like the pathway, they just stop. You know, like, and they don't like get over to the side or like get out of the way so like the traffic can continue. They literally just stop, and they're just like looking around, not even aware that like you just stopped in front of a bunch of people behind you. It's just so annoying.
Number 2, what is the key to happiness?
You know, I think there's a lot that goes into happiness. Like the other thing I think that's interesting is happiness. It's very condition based versus like, you've probably heard like joy, like transcends condition. But I do think there's a difference, and I think happiness is important. I don't think it's the most important, and I think it gets a little bit overplayed, but the key to it in my mind is probably two main things, at least that I'm thinking about right now. One is perspective. So how do you view the world? How do you view your situation? How do you approach hard things? There is a direct connection between gratitude and happiness. I know that. That's been like proven in science. So perspective, I think, is the key piece of that. Like perspective leads to the realization that I have a lot to be grateful for, and therefore I can be happy with my current situation. And then the second thing I'd say is health. Like, are you healthy? Because I think that's a direct connection to happiness as well. If you're in a healthy place, generally you're going to be happier.
Number 3, what's your favorite part about yourself?
I think that my favorite thing about myself is that I love creating space for people to just be who they are.
Yep.
That's just been natural for me my whole life. And so I don't tout that as like, oh, that's just, I did that. I think it's literally like, it's just the way I was made. And I think that is what I'm so grateful for and appreciate about the way that I'm wired.
One of my favorite parts about you, personally. I was hoping you were going to say that.
Thank you. I appreciate that, Ryan.
Yeah. Number 4, COVID-19, tips and tricks.
There's definitely specific things I think we can be doing during this time, but I also generally think we probably are just being made aware of things that we should have probably been focused on already. So like, it's just bringing to the surface things that I think people are really having to face for the first time, whether that's like loneliness or being in a situation, whether that's a relationship that's unhealthy or family connection that all of a sudden now is like really flaring up because we're stuck with that person, or we're just stuck kind of in that same spot. So part of me wonders like if COVID is actually just bringing to the surface all the things that have already been there, but now we have to face in many ways. And I think we're still trying to find ways to get away from it. Embracing the season for what it is, because we can't change it, right? Like, I think, what is it actually illuminating about our lives that maybe we don't like or want to change? Or what are the pieces that like we start to see as pieces of ourselves that maybe like we're just now realizing like are hard for other people, or pieces of the people that we're in relationships with that maybe we need to speak a little bit of like honesty towards. And at the same time, I think we just have to be extra aware that we need to be extra kind. I think everyone's struggling on some level, and it doesn't do any good to be honking at them as you're waiting, or, you know, getting angry because it takes a little bit longer to get your food. Or I just think we have to have extra space and grace in these times of just a lot going on. And I think the more we can embrace that, and part of me why I started with saying it should always be that way is because I think it should, right? Like, I think that should be our posture all the time. But now, especially, I think it's like we just need to be a little bit more forgiving to each other.
Last one. What's your proudest moment?
But I think about when I left Young Life, it was one of the hardest decisions I've had to make. I think that I'm proud that I was able to be honest enough with myself, and with the support and help of Emily, my wife, and family members and close friends who were able to help me with that. So it certainly wasn't me alone. But I'm proud that I was able to make that really hard decision and actually follow through, and to leave something that I cared so deeply about for the sake of my own health, putting myself in a better position to heal and get to a better place mentally and emotionally and spiritually. And it was really hard, but I think I'm proud that I did make that decision.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, like, was it worth it? Taking a non-selfish, not even a word, but like taking care of yourself.
Yeah, I do, because I think it's actually funny that you say it like that. In the end, it's actually very unselfish, because I think you're actually allowing yourself to be a better person for those around you. In the end, that's really all our closest relationships need from us, right? And if you're not able to do that in a circumstance, no matter how much you love and care and deeply about the cause, or if it's deteriorating core aspects of who you are and preventing you from being the healthiest version of yourself, then it's really not the best thing for you. And it can be a really hard thing to face, right? Like, that could be a relationship you're in, that could be a job, that could be a hobby, that could be a lot of different things. But I think that's a really hard question that I think we're more often than not, and this was true for me, we're really afraid to ask. Is that actually the best thing for me? In actuality, that extends to, is it the best thing for those closest to me? And to make that decision is very challenging, but I think it's worth it. Because I think we come out on the other side and we realize like we were really blinded by a lot because of that. And you start to unpack everything that happened. And I think you start to see there was a lot I wasn't aware of. And now I get to see that in a different light because of that.
Your story's a beautiful one, man. It really is. And truly blessed to have had you on my podcast. And, I've known you for a little bit now, and it's always cool to check in. What I want to do now is I want to have you do an outro where I want you to pick a person in your life who's had some form of impact on you. Got you into ministry, got you into sports, got you into this, that, whatever you want, but we're picking one person and say, shout out Janice from 8th grade. Just go on an encouragement rant for however long you want. So that way you can share this part of the podcast if you want to have a little nugget of encouragement, like, hey, listen to this second half of the podcast I talked about you.
I'll do David Bell, and I will say to David that David has been such a key figure in my life, because he's always loved and cared for me exactly where I am. Didn't try to change me, didn't try to make me somebody that I wasn't, but always was my biggest cheerleader and my biggest fan, pushing me to be my best self. And but not pushing in a bad way, pushing in I love you so deeply. He has been such an influence in my decisions in my careers and in ministry and in pursuing things, but also been a huge champion of health and setting me on a good path to taking care of myself and making wise decisions, whether that's in my marriage, whether that's in my relationships and in so many capacities. And he's just very steadfast and cares for you very deeply. Much love and care and respect and affection for David.
Shout out. Thanks so much, man, for being on here.
Absolutely. This is a lot of fun. I appreciate the questions. I'm really appreciative of what you're doing. I hope that this platform is a really safe place for a lot of people. And in many ways, I respect that season of where there may be many people who listen to your podcast, and to just listen and absorb things can sometimes be very therapeutic. And I hope that this space is very effective in that, allowing people to just be who they need to be and just hear someone else's thoughts for a little bit. So, and I'm really, really encouraged by you and your passion and energy to create a space like that. I hope that people listening know that that's your heart and that's what you care about so deeply.
Thank you, man. You're the best. We'll say goodbye to the people. Goodbye, guys.
Where are they, by the way?
For the people listening? I don't know. I can look at my analytics.
Goodbye, people. Is that what I'm supposed to say?
Yeah.
Hey everybody, this is Ryan from the Classic Buffalo Podcast. Wanted to take a second to talk about Anchor, how I'm actually making this podcast happen. Super happy that I'm partnering with them. So, Anchor is actually the easiest way to make a podcast. I've done my research. This is basically the best way. I promise. It's going to give you everything you need in one place for free, which is the best part. It's going to have tools, so you don't really need a fancy schmancy recording guy. Anchor's going to be helping you out there, and then they're going to distribute the podcast everywhere to Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google, everything. And then you can also make money with basically no minimum listenership, which is kind of rare. So hop on Anchor as soon as you can. Thanks. And that's the episode. Thank you so much for listening to today's episode of me interviewing one of my friends and or just random people. If you would like to be like Luke, please reach out to me over Instagram at Classic Buffalo, and we can kind of set up a little interview. I'm not really sure when we're going to be doing in-persons, but I've gotten a new microphone as far as a new recording way to do all that kind of jazz, which I'm pumped about, which hopefully you'll notice in the coming episodes. These next ones were before I was able to get this new microphone. So, but in the future, it's coming. You'll have some higher quality stuff, hopefully. But if you would like to be like Luke and be on this episode, be on any episode. You can't be on this episode because it's already over. But if you'd like to be on an episode, I'd love to have you share your experience with mental health. What are you passionate about? What are you trying to do in life? Kind of just share your story. So I'd love to have that. reach out over Instagram. And at this point, I'd like to talk a little bit about Luke. Luke's one of my favorite people. It's unfortunately one of those things, like, we both are really busy. And then on top of COVID, I know relationships in general have both been rejuvenated with people you haven't talked with in a long while. And other times, like, you've kind of lost track. It's been hard to keep up with people. So, but every single time I interact with Luke, it's been like, I always feel really great about myself. I just, the way that he says my name, the way that he, there's intention behind everything that he says. There's love. There is, we had the genuine moments. I had to keep in I had to keep in what happened at the, my freaking AC. I don't know I've just got my AC problems out here in the club. I don't know what I'm doing. Saving money, but not really that much, or just really not even paying attention. So that was just a really funny moment I had to keep in. But me and him just have a history through grace. I remember, back when I was a Christian and being so, this guy just came across as this really popular guy. I'm like, man, I want to get to know this guy. He's always happy. He's so popular. Everybody loves this guy. And Luke's very humble about that, but he was one of the most popular people that I know, like, at that church. And for us to have meetings, and for every time for me to have all these questions in my life, I've always seen Luke, even though he's only a couple years older than me, like, as just this so much wiser guy. And I've always seen him as someone who just has it all together and asks the right questions. And he reminds me a lot of John Crawford, which has also mentored him as well. He's a little bit old. Like, again, you'd think it was like 5, 10, 15 years in between all three of us, but it's like 2 or 3 years. But just that, I view both of them in the same boat. It's just they ask such probing and great questions that they don't really necessarily tell you what they would do. Sometimes they do, but it's usually good what their opinion is. But they just ask the right questions that you need to answer. And for you, I think in therapy, that's kind of helpful. I feel like is when you can find the answer yourself sometimes. But just having somebody who asks the right questions and is honest and loves you where you're at. And I think Luke does a really good job of that. But, for someone like me who really has romanticized and deified my ideas, I guess I would say, or like my passions, and put so much energy, when I was talking with Luke of this new last chapter of his life in this last year of losing his dream and feeling like so burnt out, I was really intrigued because I kind of felt like I was heading that way myself. And I really wanted to just kind of this was almost for my own sake of just kind of trying to figure out, how do you deal with burnout? How do you deal with when you've completely lost passion or joy for this one thing that either you grew up thinking you were going to do someday, or you just get really excited about and you've been working towards, and then all of a sudden you're just so burnt out and you didn't expect it. Or maybe it's just not the right time or whatever. And how do you grieve with that? And Luke's journey through mental health has just been so beautiful recently, of learning about journaling and just the undervalued art of crying. Similar to that in my own story, when I would be in a counseling session, like, man, I'm just trying to cry right now. I'm just trying to do it. But it's like, even by forcing that, it kind of, I almost look at it as if there's like two selves of you. One of is like the most raw, unconscious, inner child that needs to feel safe and to feel heard and to felt loved. And so if you're going to cry and have that person come out, this attitude of like trying to force it just so you can cry, because if you do cry, you're making progress and you can like feel it. It's that person might not want to come out because it's almost like you're abusing your inner self of sorts. And so, if you can I would say, give yourself the space, love that inner child of yourself to say, hey, it's okay if you want to cry. I'm not going to judge you. I love me. I love you. You're talking to yourself here, but do that. The value of crying, and especially in a masculine culture. I took a test recently that was really awesome. It comes from the book of why men don't listen and why women can't read maps. And it just has a lot to do with how, as men and women, what are we just predisposed to do over years and years and years of evolution and science, and just like how are our brains wired differently. And I've just fell in love with this book, and I'll talk about it at some point in a big depth, or more depth. That's probably a better way of saying it. But one of the tests you can take, it will help you kind of show you how masculine or feminine your brain is. And I took that, and I was not surprised, but I just was kind of like, oh yeah, that's kind of affirms this belief that I have a pretty, I don't know, I would say still average, but a feminine leaning brain of very sensitive towards some things. And I can go into more depth at another time, but it just, I felt like that was affirming some things of just being more sensitive towards emotions and feeling like I can cry more easily or other kinds of stuff. And just, if that's you, lean into it. Lean into who you are. Don't try to be somebody you're not, because then you're not going to make progress regardless, trying to be somebody else. But, give crying a chance, give journaling a chance. If you're a friend or family member of Luke, you're blessed. Get to know this guy. He's a really, really cool guy. He's always been supportive of me since day one, and always asked the best questions. And I'm just so grateful to have him as a friend in my life and just stay in touch with him. So, Luke, thank you so much. You've given me, ironically, I'm just kind of somewhat coming out of this break that I was doing, and I just got back from vacation from Wisconsin, and just kind of on a whim, just trying to get out of town. And, I was burnt out from vintage Indian classic buffalo, and it's hard, once you are burnt out, is how do you get it back? And so I'm in the process of trying to figure that out. But I think the best thing I could have done was take a month break, and that's kind of what I did. So, I'm still trying to strategize and figure out what this stuff looks like, so that I can take care of myself and there's no expense at my own self in order to take care of you guys and to make content and stuff like that. That's the goal, is to strategize how I can still be me and still be fed and, love myself and still do things I enjoy and not feel like trapped or feel like I'm just depleted, by doing these types of side businesses and these things. So, and Luke's an inspiration to me. So, hopefully you were able to listen to today's episode, and even if something I didn't mention, points out to you, that was really good advice on therapy or this or that or whatever, hopefully you were able to pick something out from today's episode. And if not, go listen to another episode or next week, we're going to have another one. So, everyone's story's probably not for everybody, but I do think that there's something you could probably get from everybody. So that's why I started this podcast. And that's all I got. I'm just going to stop saying this just in case, but, we should have an episode next week, but, in the case that this takes me, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, I don't want you guys to freak out if you're like, oh, he's gone again. So I'm just going to say until next time, but I know it will be next week because I have an episode ready for next week. It's already ready. Cocked and loaded, ready to fire into your podcast library and into your ears. It's all ready. So until next time, guys, it's been your boy Ryan. Talk soon.